What are your biggest bold predictions for the offseason? That's right, we're going to get crazy. We're going to have fun, and we are going to talk about what we think is going to happen. And it's going to get a little spicy. We're going to talk what my bold predictions are. I'm sure Dave will give us a bold prediction or two, and some from the fan base, what they think is going to happen this offseason. Strap in, and welcome to another episode of the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show, sponsored by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, up in the top left corner, he is producer Dave. Dave, what is the boldest bourbon that you've had in the last little while?
Boldest? What do you mean by boldest? I am drinking tonight. I've got it mixed because I'm down. My stock is way low in anticipation of next month. So, boldest, I probably finished off the last of the Still Austin Select, Barrel Select that I had. It's about 120 proof or 120%. It was up there.
Okay. Yeah. Bold is usually a word that we use in the world of wine, as most of you know. Before I started doing full time, I ran a liquor store. When it's like big, bold flavors, you'll sometimes hear that in like commercials for like Olive Garden and Applebee's, where they're trying to get you to buy into the like the new menu items that they've got. And I think bold is a very interesting thing here, because there are ones that are very similar. And as Robert asked, this is live. We are having fun. And Freedom Thinker caught that it registered the wrong mic. So we've got that fixed as well. Dave loves his tacos, and we love, I'm not going to lie, Dave, I am very jealous of you because I've been to Texas, and Tex-Mex is one of my favorite like genres of food.
Mm-hmm.
There's Mexican food. There's what I call like fake Mexican food. Like you have like the Mexican restaurants that kind of do Mexican food up here. You have like your Taco Bell where it's like Mexican inspired, but it's not real Mexican food. There's just something special about Tex-Mex where you get the bold flavors of kind of a little bit of everything that is just really special.
And there's difference between Tex-Mex, New Mexico Mex, or New Mex, Cali Mex. They're all different flavors, but they all have the same roots. So
yeah, it's kind of like a fusion, and it's really cool. Cause and Effect asked if you can expect to see me at the SKOL North draft party. No discussions have been had yet, but my guess is yes. If I'm not at the SKOL North draft party, you can bet your ass Dave and I will be sitting here having a good time streaming all 3 days, because we are, and I mean this in a very positive way, we're psychopaths.
Yes.
And it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. But we're not here to talk about the draft. We're here to talk about free agency. Well, I guess talk about the draft a little bit, because bold predictions, I have 6 of them, Dave. So I'm going to give you some time. I would like to hear a few of yours, but I kind of sprung the idea of, hey, I need some from you last minute. So I'm going to give you plenty of time to do that. I want to start with a couple that I got when I posted the question on Twitter. If you guys have some good ones in the live chat, go ahead and throw them in. I'll talk about them. I think this one from Scott Dawson really piqued my interest. His bold prediction is that the Vikings will moneyball the secondary and spend the majority of assets on interior O-line and interior defensive line. And I find that interesting. I want to clear something up, because there's this idea that the Vikings have a bad interior defensive line, and that's just simply not true. They just don't have a great pass rusher on the interior of the defensive line, but that doesn't mean they're bad. The Vikings had the second best rush defense in the National Football League last year, mainly because the defensive line played so incredibly well. That's a huge factor here. The defensive line has to stop the run first. Getting pressure is secondary. Now, is that necessarily the way everybody wants to play? No, it's not. But that's also the reality of it. You have to be able to play the run. That's why guys like Yannick Ngakoue go in the second round, because they can rush the passer, but they can't stop the run. And we saw that when we traded for him in 2020. And that's just kind of been his role in the National Football League, bouncing around. He'll get 8 to 10 sacks. He'll play well on third downs. But you're not going to give a guy more than like $10 million who's only going to play like 40% of the snaps. That's just not how it works. So these elements are a big factor here. I think they do need to find a pass rusher on the interior of the defensive line. I think they need to find a way to get pressure on the interior. The quickest path to the quarterback is going straight. The hardest path to the quarterback is also going straight. So getting pressure from the interior is a bonus. If that guy's getting 10 to 12%, you're pretty happy with that as far as like a pressure rate, because it is really hard to generate from the inside. But at the same time, it's hard to find those guys who can play the run and also pressure consistently. Like Jonathan Bullard, elite run defender last year. He was so good at tube gapping. He was so good at penetrating and getting pressure up the middle in the run game. But in the pass game, he had like a 2% pressure rate. You're not paying Jonathan Bullard to rush the passer. You're paying him to stop the run. So if you could get a 7 to 8% pressure rate from Jonathan Bullard, that is an elite level defensive lineman. But you're also paying him $2 million. So you're getting what $2 million gets you, a great run defender. And I think
that's a good price for that.
Oh, it's a great price for that. I'd give Bullard $3 or $4 million to get him back next year. He was awesome. Eventually, that's going to fall off a cliff, but I think he's 31 years old. He's fine for a little bit longer. Those guys usually hold up better because strength doesn't die. Athleticism dies. If you got strength, you can hold up a lot longer. It's why, like guys who are like strong-armed in the NFL at quarterback, when they start to lose that arm strength, they can adapt and adjust better than guys who just have average arm strength, because you still have capable arm strength. It does not crater the same way. I like the idea of getting a really good interior pass rusher. The problem is you have to find one. Who's going to give you one? There's a lot of talk about Milton Williams, and yes, he had a good Super Bowl. Here are the two things about Milton Williams. One, he's not great at defending the run. A lot of him defending the run is on third downs, is in sub packages. He's not an every down defender. He is a situational pass rusher. And you know what? He's great at it. I have not seen anything to where I believe Milton Williams can be a consistent run defender. And you're probably going to have to pay that guy $18 to $20 million a year.
I read today where he was, prior to the Super Bowl, forecasted for 3 years, 36. So $12 million a year.
Who did those forecasts that you saw, Dave?
I would have to look at the write-up. But now it's $20 million.
Yeah.
And $20 million is too much for just a guy that comes in on third downs.
Yeah. I don't think you can give that guy $20 million. And you know what? If that's the price, let somebody else pay it. You're going to have to overpay in free agency, but overpaying versus being gouged are two different things. And I think you'd be gouged to give him $20 million. I would prefer Levi Onwuzurike. I do like Levi. You can probably get him for 10 to 12. He's been injured, but he's played really well outside of that. I love Osa Odigizua, who I think is probably going to come in that $13-15 million range. A really good gap shooting 3 technique, but he holds up well enough as a run defender to where it's not a deterrent. he's not going to be as good as Bullard, but you're not asking him to be. You're asking him to be capable. And I think he can be capable as a run defender. And when you have that kind of gap shooting pass rusher, that's what I want. I want capable. And I think you can get that with Odigizua. But there's this prevailing thought that the Vikings have this bad defensive line. That's just not true. It's not great. And good is the enemy of great, and I'll give you that. And I want to see it improve too. But we're not in this desperate state where we just have to elevate this to this next level. That's just not how it works. And as far as the interior offensive line, look, there's also a prevailing thought that they need to replace all three guys. And you know what? Over the course of time, you're probably right. Bradbury right now is a bang average center who you're paying bang average center money. Right now, who are you going to get that's better? I'm not convinced it's Drew Dahlman, who's just going to give you these same kind of problems that Garrett Bradbury does. I'll take Garrett Bradbury at his money than the unknown who can give you the same problems at double or triple the cost. That's kind of where we're sitting. If you told me Creed Humphrey was available for $17 million a year, I'd take it. Because I know what I'm getting from Creed Humphrey. I'm getting all pro level play. And that's worth that money. But a guy like Dahlman, he just offers you, it's like Dave, have you ever seen the Family Guy bit where Peter gets offered a boat or the mystery box? And he's like, oh, a boat. We've always wanted those. But the mystery box, that could be anything. It could be a boat. Like that's kind of what we're sitting here with, like getting a guy like Dahlman. I don't think he's a bad player, but I don't think anything that we've seen from him will convince me that he's going to be this elite level upgrade, especially considering the dead money you're going to take from Bradbury and then the money you have to give Dahlman. To me, that just doesn't compute.
I have not seen what Dahlman is forecast to get, but I haven't watched Dahlman to watch Dahlman, but looking at PFF, and I'll take that with a grain of salt, he's 15 points better than Bradbury in both overall grade and pass blocking grade, and he's a good run blocker. So that's an improvement. Now, whether it's just PFF seeing that, I don't know. But that's what I'm seeing, and I'd rather have the guy that grades out better than Bradbury. Bradbury overall is a 62.8. Dahlman is a 78.8. That's almost 80 on overall offense. Pass blocking, he's a 66.6, whereas Bradbury is a lousy 50.5.
Yeah, but you know how
and he's
I
a
feel
better
about
run blocker. Yes,
you know how I feel about PFF grades.
But it's the only thing we have without watching the film, is what I'm saying. And that, to me, is an improvement on just looking at the grades. It's a huge improvement. Now, whether it's worth the dollars or whether he'll fit the system or not, I really want size. And I haven't looked up, as earlier today on the NFC North show, Who Will Be King, hosted this week by the Detroit Lions Bleachers to Speakers show. We talked about offensive linemen, both for us and for the Chicago Bears, because they are desperate for them as well. And the one thing we talked about with the Eagles and such is the size. If we can get the size and the power, that can make up for a lot of the finesse, because the size and the power wears on defenses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's got its own quality to it.
I think that's fair, but here's the thing with Dahlman. He's a wide zone center. He's basically the exact same size as Bradbury. So you're basically asking for a mystery box, hoping he's better for significantly more money. Pro Football Focus has him projected $11.5 million per year. Now, Brad Spielberger Spielberger does not do the projections anymore for PFF, to my knowledge. because I believe
No,
he left PFF.
Mhm.
And Over the Cap doesn't have free agency projections. I'm assuming that will come in time, but
They have their
I'm not
valuation, which is way lower.
I'm not willing to give like double the money for a guy that I don't think is going to give you double the results. I think he's going to give you some of the same problems. And if you want just to change, I can completely understand that, because Bradbury, he's got his problems. But I think if you fix right guard and you get Christian Darrisaw back, this is a top 5, top 10 unit.
Oh, and it very well could. It was number 1 for quite a while during last season.
Yeah. Something that Luke Braun has said,
healthy,
which I completely agree with. There's just an offensive line epidemic in the National Football League. It's just bad.
What have I said for years now?
That you love bourbon.
Well, that there's a problem with offensive linemen. Always been, ever since it's going on decades now, and there's a shortage, and there's so far and few between. That it comes up from when the concussion scare came out. All the parents pulled their kids back and says, "No, we're not going to do this." And then, so they're not playing peewee and full go hitting all the works, when actually that at that point in time they could be learning the proper techniques and how to hit. But hey, it's Joe Blow down the streets, the coach, so you're not necessarily getting what you want. Or they besides not playing, society changes. They're now inside on playing games versus outside playing pickup games. And then college football changed. They went to the more spread versus the power run type of stuff that was prevalent in the 90s. And that changed the way offensive line played as well, because they spread them out. They're different goals in mind. It was just to, wall off a side versus, opening up holes for an option, a triple option of some sort, veer, wishbone, whatever, pick your choice. And so there's fewer and fewer quality linemen hitting the NFL. And it's not because the ones that don't want to. They do. They've got the heart for it. And obviously, they're training to be a top-level athlete to do that. But there are so few and far between. That's why it's taken longer and longer for them to adjust to the NFL as well.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's a shortage, and it's hard. That's one of the reasons why the good ones get paid. Why we've seen good guards go up to over $20 million a year.
Yeah,
in cost.
Speaking of guards, the second one that we'll talk about came from I gotta find it. Rocco Baldelli Goat on Twitter said Ed Ingram finally gets cut. And I think you could be right, but that cut's not happening till after training camp. And here's why. Whether you like Ingram or not, he's played at a starting level for a certain amount of time. I think he's played better than most people do. I'm also completely fine replacing him. But he's on the 4th year of his rookie contract. Those guys don't get cut until after final cuts. They just don't. His dead money now or in August will be about $330,000. And I think they will take the bet that, hey, maybe he can improve in year 4, because as Davis talked about, it's very hard to play offensive line. Maybe he does finally take that step. And if he doesn't, you can get rid of him. Otherwise, that's still a fair price for a backup guard. So I think that's kind of the thing. Let's talk about some of my bold predictions. I'm going to give a couple, Dave, then I'm going to fire it over to you, because I want to hear some of yours. My first one is the Vikings will only sign one starting caliber free agent interior offensive lineman. And that offensive lineman I'm going to predict is James Daniels from the Pittsburgh Steelers. One of the reasons I kind of went with Daniels, he's got center experience, he's got guard experience, and I think that kind of versatility will allow the Vikings to choose their best 5 up front. I think Daniels will probably end up playing guard, and I think he's a pretty good one. He was drafted by the Chicago Bears. He played with the Pittsburgh Steelers the last couple of years. Just solid. You're not going to be able to move him much in the run game. He's athletic enough to be able to climb to the second level. He's not going to do the elite level stuff. Think Ed Ingram level athlete as far as movement skills. It's kind of what you're getting. It's capable enough, but there are going to be some limitations when you run some outside and wide zone stuff where he's not going to be able to climb and scoop the way you quite want. But with how much in mid zone and duo stuff the Vikings have been running, I think you can kind of get away with that. So I think James Daniels is probably going to be the guy. Would not shock me if they make the run after Trey Smith. Ben Gessling has already reported that. I think that's a huge, huge factor in how things are kind of playing out here.
I go with James Daniel, even though he blew his Achilles last year.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. I forgot he blew his Achilles, but that's probably going to help you get him at a discount. And quite frankly, you guys may not want to hear it, but this is what I believe. I don't think Kwesi thinks guards matter. I think they matter to an extent. I don't think they matter to a level that you, as the fan base, want it to matter because it's been a prevailing issue for 13 years. I just think that this is an area where he wants the money ball. And I think there's merit to that. I also think that last year was a little bit of an aberration because $72 million in dead cap, you have to super money ball something. And I think he made the right choice, money balling the interior of the offensive line. But I just don't think he's going to value it enough to where the fan base on an overall level is going to be happy with what happens at the interior of the offensive line. That's my read on it. I'll gladly admit I was wrong if he decides to go full bore and sign a couple guards for big time money. But there, like he said in his season-ending press conference, the growth is not always linear. You can't just always replace these guys and expect it to immediately get better. There's growth in coaching. There's growth year over year. There's growth in getting healthy. It's an interesting dichotomy. I know the comments are talking about, hey, O'Connell wants the guard. O'Connell wants improvement. He wants better. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen in the way you want it to. And that's all I'm saying. Just because you want Trey Smith and you want Drew Dahlman and you want Will Fries does not mean you're going to get them. So
yeah, there's maybe 31 other teams that want him too.
Maybe I'm Mr. Negativity, but I'm just trying to be realistic. I think they're going to pay decent money for one guard. One. And I think it'll be a guy like James Daniels. You'll give $8 to $10 million. And
PFF has him forecast at 5.5.
Okay. Well, then it's 5.5. And I think you might be able to get, depending on what the medicals look like, you might be able to, Brian O'Neill came back just fine from his Achilles. Mike Sullivan saying, if you listen to O'Connell,
year before hold on,
Dave. Yeah, he was fine in 23. He was fine. Mike Sullivan saying, if you listen to O'Connell's press conference, he called it the interior of the offensive line. Yes, but you're also missing my point. Growth is not linear. Growth is not you replace all three of those guys. If Christian Darrisaw plays in that game, Blake Brandel, in my opinion, is fine. Therefore, Garrett Bradbury's job is easier. And you have one weakness, right guard. Christian Darrisaw, the loss of him was the catalyst for multiple problems on that offensive line in those final two games. They just happen to manifest themselves at the worst time. O'Connell wants improvement on the interior offensive line. Just be prepared for you to not like what they choose to do. That's all I'm saying. Just be prepared that it's not what your ideal scenario is, because they may be very happy with how they improve it. Just be prepared. Just be prepared. That's all I'm saying. All right. I think I'm done talking about the interior of the offensive line for a little bit.
My bold prediction is that you won't get really bold. All three get replaced.
That is very bold. I don't think it'll happen. I think one guy. I think one guy gets
Ingram
replaced,
and
that's
Brandel
it.
will stay back as backups. But I think all three may get replaced. Now, that's bold. Now, do I think it's going to be Trey Smith? No. Do I think it's going to be Will Fries? Oh, I'd wish, but probably not. But on the left guard side, I would love to have Tevin Jenkins.
And he can play right, too.
And so, and he's only 27. That's not bad. And we're looking at guys, for the most part, that are coming off their first contract. Now, unless they do a temp fix. And by a temp fix, I mean 1-year deal to Zeitler, right? To hold the fort down. But no, my bold prediction is all three of them will be replaced. Now, whether it comes to fruition, the only thing I worry about is the center position, because there doesn't seem to be that many outstanding centers available.
No.
Now, but whether they draft one, maybe. But we'll see.
Possible.
But Bradbury just, to me, is, yes. Would Bradbury play with both guards playing better? Oh, yes, he would. But if you had a better center, would both guards play better? Yes, they would. But I think the focus is Bradbury's a great run blocker. I'm not going to diss him on that. He does well. He's a zone running scheme run blocker. I think the team wants to go to more power and hopefully size. And the only probably way that you're going to find that is through the draft. But I suspect there's going to be competition at least at all three this year. Put it that way. For the starter jobs.
It's going to be really interesting to see what they do with the interior offensive line, because how I've read it is the comments from O'Connell and Kwesi Ofamensa have been taken by most people the way they want to interpret it. Where I kind of went in, O'Connell called it out, and he wants changes. He wants improvement. I think you're going to get a significant amount of improvement just by getting Christian Darrisaw back.
Yeah, especially, but is it enough? Especially after watching what happened in the playoffs.
I'm not even saying it's enough, but I'm saying that that's going to be such an improvement that I think it's just they're going to view that as, okay, that basically fixes left guard. Now we can worry about, I think right guard needs to be the priority. And then center is your least important of the three as far as upgrading, because I think you're getting the best level of play out of center versus right guard and left guard. Like, I don't even think Garrett Bradbury's great. I wouldn't extend him, but he's giving you.
He's going to his last year of his contract.
Yeah. He's giving you bang average play and eating.
Just like Ed Ingram is.
Eating $3 million in dead cap to me is just bad business. It would just be a bad business practice to cut him to get a complete unknown.
Not unless it cost you losing to the Rams and to the Lions, and you get that unknown and he fixes it.
The reason why you lost to the Rams and Lions was because you had no Christian Darrisaw, and I'm gonna stand by that.
The pressure came up the middle for the most part.
Yeah.
And Darrisaw, God love him, plays outside tackle. Now, does he help the left side guard? Yes, without a doubt. But he doesn't fix center and right guard.
Nobody fixes left guard, and that's a huge factor here. The biggest issue with Cam Robinson, one of the reasons why so much that pressure came up the middle, was he gets his ass beat to the inside. So that pressure looks like it's coming up the middle. It's not coming from around him. And that's a huge factor. So then you have Brandel like second guessing himself, whereas if you have Christian Darrisaw on an island, I trust that he's just going to block that guy. So that completely shifts how Blake Brandel plays. And then in turn, that shifts how Garrett Bradbury plays. And that's why it's this avalanche effect with the rest of the interior of the offensive line. So you get Christian Darrisaw back, that fixes more than people want to believe. And I stand by the fact that if you have Darrisaw in those two games, that pressure does not manifest itself nearly in the same way. And it's the offensive line probably plays significantly better as a collective whole with him just because of his presence. His presence means more than people realize.
Yeah, but
and we saw that in those final 2 games.
But you got to be able to count on people even with somebody missing. It's how you build a team. Now, do you expect a drop-off? Sure. But do you expect complete and utter failure? No.
And I think that's where some of this Moneyball stuff, we're going to find a really interesting answer here, because he had to Moneyball something last year with $72 million in dead cap. He's going into this offseason with like $3.5 or $4 million in dead cap. It's significantly less. Now, that number is going to go up based on free agency, because Sam Darnold, if he doesn't return, that's $5 million in dead cap. If Harrison Smith retires, it could be up to $10 million in dead cap. Byron Murphy Jr. is like $5.5 million in dead cap if he leaves. So there will be some additions to that, but they're not going to be hindered by the fact that they're going to have some dead cap like they were last year. So we're going to find out real quick how serious Kwesi Adofo-Mensah does feel about the interior of that offensive line, because he's going to have resources. I just believe they're going to sign one guy. And maybe I'll have to relook the James Daniels thing.
I disagree. This is a bold take show.
Yep. All right, let's continue on with some bold takes. I think the Vikings are going to sign 3 defensive backs in free agency. I think it'll end up being San Francisco 49ers corner Charvarius Ward, Miami Dolphins safety corner Javon Holland, and Packers cornerback Eric Stokes. And that's going to be the one that is going to get the most like, what? Why would they sign him? And I think the idea is former first round pick, never really got his footing, mainly because of injuries in Green Bay. You give him like $1 to $2 million and be like, all right, you're going to have to earn your roster spot there, bucko. Let's see what happens. And maybe you can get something out of him because he was a first round pick, but injuries really destroyed his career. Can you revitalize that? I don't know. But you give him like a Fabian Moreau level contract, maybe a smidge more, and be like, you got to earn all your playing time. You got to earn it. And let's see what happens. I think that's a good calculated risk that I want Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to keep taking. Zach Bond was that way. He was making like less than $2 million. He was an all-pro at linebacker. Like, you have to take those risks, and I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has done a really good job of identifying those. Javon Holland, Brian Flores was a part of the contingency that drafted him. And look, he can play nickel, he can play safety, he can play in the box. You don't really want him playing outside. But if you don't have Byron Murphy Jr., you still have to figure out what you're going to do at slot corner. I think Mekhi Blackmon probably will be best playing on the outside, even though he's only 178 pounds. But it's the play style to me that matters. He doesn't play small. He doesn't play a style where he gets bullied. The weight only means so much. You can get pushed around weighing 200 pounds just as you can weighing 178. It's about how you play, what your play strength is, and how you can utilize some of that stuff. To me, that's what matters more. And I think Blackmon plays with that kind of strength where he's not going to be bullied on the line of scrimmage. And I think he can survive on the outside. Holland, all of a sudden, you can use him as a nickel. You can use him playing deep. You can do a lot of funky things with him and Josh Metellus. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting to kind of see how that manifests. Charvarius Ward, I've talked a lot about DJ Reed. The comments have even mentioned DJ Reed. I think Ward is a better player than DJ Reed. PFF has him making more money per year than DJ Reed. They're also the same age. As far as cornerbacks go, 2023, Charvarius Ward was number 1 in PFF's wins above replacement metric. Last year, I'm going to call as a little bit of a wash. He had an injury, and then he got some massive PTSD because his daughter passed away. His daughter was like 2 or 3 years old. And even said after the season that he needs to leave the state of California. He will not be re-signing with the Niners because he and his wife have such bad memories. Nobody can blame him. Sometimes you just need to get away. And it's just an absolute tragedy what happened to him and his family. On the football field, I think you're getting a really good football player. You probably only signed him 2-3 years, maybe 4. but he's 29 years old, so you don't want to go too deep into a contract with him. But he can play off, he can play man, and he's big enough where like DJ Reed's only like 5'9", but he plays way bigger than that. Charvarius Ward, I think, is 5'11", 6 foot, and he plays that size and a little bit bigger. So those are the guys that I think they will end up with. But there are a lot of really talented defensive backs, and DB is the number one need on this team right now. Because this team needs to replace 4, maybe 5 of their top 6 tomorrow or this year. Because Harrison Smith is a wild card. Technically, thanks to Ben Gessling, we know this. He is under contract for next year at the vet minimum. But they can, it's non-guaranteed. If they release him, yeah, he can retire. It'll be interesting to kind of see how, if he does retire, I think they can spread the cap hit out over 2 years. So that part will be interesting. But if you have to replace 5, you have to sign guys. You just do. And I think that's kind of the path they'll take. I think they're going to load up on secondary like they did edge last year. They're going to load up on a bunch of guys.
Let's back up. You said Gessling said he's under contract?
Yes. It was initially reported that it was the last 3 years were voided.
Right.
The salaries were just dropped to the veteran minimum. That came out last week, maybe the week before. So,
okay.
I found that very interesting because Over the Cap might still have it as void because it did at one point after Gessling reported that. Sometimes, I mean, look, nobody's perfect. Over the Cap is the most accurate, up-to-date site when it comes to contracts. I will not use Spot Track. Absolutely not. They have been caught stealing. They don't have accurate data. I just won't use it. Over the Cap, 100%. So you have to replace multiple guys. And look, I think Mekhi Blackmon is a top 3 kind of corner in the National Football League where he can either play on the outside or in the slot. I think Dwight McGlothern has a future. How good a future? I don't know. It's hard to know.
I hope Nudie balls out and makes himself a legend.
I hope so too, but you don't want to count on a second-year UDFA to be your third corner. You want that guy to be your 4th or 5th in training camp, and he can earn his way up. That's the ideal scenario. That's kind of what they were doing with Kyrie Jackson before he tragically passed away, where he wasn't going to be the guy right away, but he could earn his way up to getting real snaps quickly. And I think they might be in the position where they can do that with a Nudie. Third one.
By the way,
Mike
OTC
Sullivan
is still showing void.
Yeah. I'm going to trust Gessling. Gessling is the one who gets all the cap stuff on the Vikings beat. Mike Sullivan mentioned that Byron Murphy gets re-signed to book it. I believe the Vikings are going to franchise tag Byron Murphy Jr. There's been a lot of talk about franchise tagging Sam Darnold. But quite frankly, I don't think they'll do it. Because one, if they're going to sign him to a big contract, it's going to be a multi-year deal. I don't think they're going to sign him to a franchise tag contract. And the idea of the tag and trade sounds good in theory, but it's a Madden myth. Guys don't get tagged and traded often at all. They just don't. The guys who get tagged and traded are like D Ford. D Ford got a 2nd round pick as a premier pass rusher. Jadeveon Clowney got a 3rd round pick and 2 role players. Guys just don't get tagged and traded for buku bucks, buku return. If Darnold was in the final year of his contract and he played like that and he had the 1 year left, I think you could maybe get a 2nd or 1st round pick for him considering what this quarterback class is. But with a tag and trade, I don't think you're getting that at all. I just don't see it being plausible.
What are you thinking? Transition or franchise?
No, I think they franchise tag Byron Murphy, but that's why I'm talking about Darnold, because I just don't think they're going to do that.
That's $20 million.
Yeah. I think on the open market, Byron Murphy gets between 17 and 20. The top of the market now for cornerbacks is $24 million. So you would be giving Byron Murphy, who's a starter in the Pro Bowl, who had a great season, and he just turned 27, or he's about to turn 27 in like 2 weeks. He's 27. You give him a 3-year, $60 million contract. It's a lot of money, but I also don't think it's stupid. I think they tag him to keep him, and I think they'd be willing to pay him big money. That's my read on it. I reserve the right to change that opinion, but I think if they're going to use a franchise tag, something that the Vikings have not really shown an interest in so far with this regime, they've only used it 5 times. Henry Thomas, Randall McDaniel, Jim Kleinsasser, Chad Greenway, and Anthony Harris. Jim Kleinsasser got the franchise tag. How cool is that?
It was.
But
for Murph, I can tell you the Packers have interest, and we don't want him going there.
No. It would also be interesting to see if the Vikings would have interest in Jair Alexander. I think he's out of there. I think it would be very interesting to kind of get him as like a reclamation project because he's going to be motivated with and when the Packers cut him. And he won't impact the comp pick formula, which while doing these bold predictions, there's so many guys who are going to get cut. I think the Vikings are going to target a few of those because they don't count towards the comp pick formula. And if you lose Sam Darnold, then all of a sudden you get a third round comp pick back. And that leads me to my 4th bold prediction. I don't know who it's going to be with, but Sam Darnold will sign a multi-year deal worth at least $40 million per year. I don't know who it's going to be with. I'd say it's around a 10% chance it's the Vikings. I'm not going to go higher than that. The last 2 games are like a final in college. They're weighted heavier, but you can't ignore the first 16 games. And of those first 16 games, he was great in 14 of them. So there's a lot of interesting data points. If all things were equal and you don't have to worry about money, I would probably pick Darnold over JJ McCarthy. But it's always about money because this is a salary cap league. This isn't the Premier League over in England where you can just spend as much money as you want. This is the NFL. You have to worry about money. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor in this whole conversation. Somebody's going to give this guy the Daniel Jones contract, which is 4 years, $160. And I think he gets that on a minimum dollar amount. And one of the reasons why I think he gets that would put him as the 16th highest paid quarterback in the National Football League, tied with Matthew Stafford. That sounds about fair.
Yeah, it's 16th? Basically the same one.
Bang average for a starter. Baker as far as like a Baker got 33 and a third.
Yeah,
but that's kind of like the median.
Cap inflation.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the median. So I think he's going to get that level of contract. Odie is just extra sleepy.
Mama's as of a couple days ago, first off, Adam Schefter on Pat McAfee's show stated that he sees Sam going to the Raiders.
His exact words were, watch for the Raiders and Sam Darnold. I've noticed with a guy like Adam Schefter, you got to be very, very tuned in.
The quote is, I think the Raiders are going to make a play for Sam Darnold, was his exact quote.
Yep. But you have to read those too, because how he frames things, he's not reporting that.
Right.
That's
and then
a
it goes,
guess.
I think Sam Darnold is a candidate to be a Raiders quarterback. Let's see if Minnesota lets him go or not. Let's see if that works out with Darnold winding up in Vegas.
I think
looking at the odds, the current odds as of a couple of days ago, Las Vegas leads at plus 200. Then comes the Steelers at plus 250. Talking to my Steeler buddies, they wouldn't mind having him, but they don't think the team isn't set up for success with Sam Darnold. Then comes the Vikings at 325, the Jets at 600, the Giants at 800. Not that he's going back to the Jets, and the Tennessee Titans at 1,400.
Yeah. My biggest media hot take is I don't think, and you know what, this might sound a little harsh, I don't think guys like Adam Schefter should be allowed to share opinions because people believe that as news and they believe that as a report. And it just, that's how misinformation can get started. And we already had that instance with the guy from the Detroit Free Press, who's a very well-respected guy who was doing a bunch of stuff and was listening to that Kevin O'Connell presser. And he misconstrued back-to-back questions, and he thought they were both about Sam Darnold when the second one was about Jefferson, and that started a whole firestorm. But I don't like when guys like Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter share their opinions and their thoughts, because then those get misconstrued as reports. And I'm not saying they don't deserve to have those. They do. But media literacy right now is at an all-time low. It's just awful. And I don't think education is caught up to the social media age yet to where we can get things caught up from a critical thinking standpoint to be able to discern what's a report and what's opinion.
Well, and I think prefaces it. I think.
I agree, but that's what I'm talking about. Media literacy sucks.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to get reported as a report, and I almost guarantee you it did by a lot of people.
It's just like when I say, "Hey, it's Dave's opinion."
Mm-hmm. But you also don't break news.
No.
And I think that's the big discernible difference. I do have two more hot takes. But before I get to those, Dave, do you have any more bold predictions?
Yeah, not that would have come. They would already come to fruition. But no. I'm interested in the secondary on how that goes. And obviously, I do believe we're going to sign one defensive tackle of some sort in free agency. Don't know who, what they're going with, but we shall see.
Mm-hmm. All right, my last two, and then I've got one more from Twitter. I think Cam Bynum leaves in free agency. And there's a Jeremy Fowler report stating, and we got this report from Ben Gessling a couple weeks ago saying that they've had conversations. They're both open to another deal. Personally, I just think he's not going to be worth the money that he'll command in the free agent market. I think you get like $15 million, maybe even approach like that $17 million range, which was Xavier McKinney made. And the big thing with Xavier McKinney is he's like a great athlete, and Bynum's not, which is why he's not playing corner anymore. I think that's a big factor for me in how this kind of plays itself out. I just don't think you can commit that kind of money to Bynum. And I love Bynum. I think he's great. I think he's great for team building. I think he's great for morale. I think he's great in the locker room. And he's a really good football player. But I don't think I'm going to give this guy $15 to $17 million kind of football player. And I think the Vikings will end up getting to that point, but we'll see. My last one.
It's just like with Bradford. The Vikings may have a money level. And they say, hey, we're glad to have you back, but we're going to pay you this much. If you find out more elsewhere, just like with Kirk Cousins last year, good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yep. My last one.
If Bynum goes, I strongly suggest they go after that Miami dude.
Mm-hmm. So my last one is very interesting. I think, Dave, I talked about this on Monday's show. I'm not 100% if I did. I think in the NFL draft, the Vikings take edge rusher in round 1. And this is a take that I've kind of been crafting over the last couple of days. The one thing that strikes me is I don't think the Vikings prioritize defensive tackle the way we think that they should prioritize defensive tackle. Brian Flores loves to have that NASCAR package. And Pat Jones is going to leave in free agency. Andrew Van Ginkel is going to leave in free agency likely after next year. There's a chance he gets extended. And if that happens, then this take's going to be.
But he's going to be in his younger 30s at that point.
He will be 30 next year, which not necessarily the biggest deal.
Right. Maybe one more.
But you don't want to invest like 4 more years into him. He's the kind of guy now you sign to 1 to 2 year deals, maybe with an option year in year 3 or something like that. I think that they'll end up taking an edge rusher because 1, the depth of the class, 2, how Brian Flores likes to play, and 3, if they have higher level edge rushers behind your top guys, they will get more rest and be fresher come playoff time. Because Van Ginkel and Grenard played 973 and 969 snaps. The third edge rusher was Jihad Ward at 505, and fourth was Pat Jones at 452, and he would have gone over 500 snaps if he didn't miss almost 3 full games due to injury. Like, they love to play edge guys. They love to have that NASCAR package. And
which would basically equate to having Milton Williams.
Pretty much.
Or better, minus a little bit of size, but not much.
I think if there's any way Shamar Stewart falls, I have a mock draft coming out tomorrow for A to Z Sports. I have Shamar Stewart going in the top 10. I think Shamar Stewart's going to be a top 5 player in the class for me. And I think with the combine and people just starting to open their eyes in the media to what he is, he's going to go top 10. But if a guy like that falls, 6'4", 281 pounds, he can play inside, he can play outside. Like, that's the kind of guy I would like to see the Minnesota Vikings get as far as an edge rusher. You don't want to necessarily get a 240-pound speedster. But then you'd have, like, if you move on from Van Ginkel, now you have 3 edges. And if there's one thing we've learned from the Eagles over the last 10 years, is having guys you can rotate in and out on the defensive line is huge. It's huge for stamina. It's huge for end of game, keeping guys fresh throughout the year end, especially in those late game situations. That's a big factor.
And big guys beating on you wears you down. Mm-hmm. And the fresher you are, the better you're at defeating that and wearing them down.
Absolutely. And I think Let's Go makes a good point, and this is kind of why this whole thing may kind of crater, is they did take an edge rusher in the first round last year. And I think taking one here isn't because you don't like Dallas Turner, you don't like his development. It's because you want to continue to fortify with premium assets at premium positions, and you think you're going to get good value for it. Now, you can also say, drafting that guy to be edge 3 in year 2 isn't necessarily a great idea, but you also have to look at how you're playing. Edge 3 probably gets 60% of the snaps, where a standard edge rusher in other, like an edge 2 in a standard offense, probably gets around 60-65% of the snaps. So if they're getting that in other defenses, you get 60% of the snaps here. I think that's a huge factor. And you also have to look at it.
Brian Flores is trying to reinvent the defense.
Yeah.
And defensive play.
And that's why it's a big thing. I think they're going to prioritize edge over defensive tackle, whether we like it or not. And I think edge rusher could be in play. Now you can make the argument, what if Brian Flores goes away? I think they're going to want to continue this type of defense and keep that kind of continuity with whoever they bring in next, whether it be like a guy like Gerard Mayo, Durante Jones being elevated and taking over the style of defense. I think you can have conversations about being able to do this stuff with a new defensive coordinator. So I love the idea. Plus, Dallas Turner has the kind of athleticism where you can play him off the ball semi-regularly and you can feel comfortable with that. He's already done it.
He was outside linebacker. Yeah.
He was thriving at the end of last year doing the off-ball stuff, including that interception against the Seahawks. That was an earned interception. It was not thrown right at him. So that's kind of where I'm at. A lot of things can impact that. A lot of things can completely nullify me believing that they'll go edge rusher. But just trying to read between the tea leaves and understand how this organization is going to want to work. Because one of the tough parts is we don't have a ton of data of how they work. And their process has evolved each year because their circumstances have significantly changed. We don't have enough trend data to truly know why. We don't have enough data to know why. And Let's Go says we also have limited picks this year because we took that edge. Yeah.
No, we have limited picks because we prepped to take a quarterback.
Well, Let's Go specifically talking about losing the 3 and the 4, and that was the Dallas Turner trade. We lost the second, but I don't have any problem giving up 2 seconds like that for a first. No, that's fine. But the 3 and the 4 is 100% the Turner trade. But free agency is for filling holes. The draft is for acquiring talent. And if they believe that edge rusher is the best player, they should just take the edge rusher, and you have a guy who knows how to maximize.
If you have the vision for that player, absolutely.
Yeah. And look, this is why they're called bold predictions. They're not supposed to be. I don't intentionally try to be contrarian. I try, based on the data I have, I try to be right. I'm not always right. Far from it. In this business, you're wrong a lot. You just are. But I try my best. And if it's contrarian, I'm okay with that because I'm comfortable enough with myself and my process. The last one, good friend of mine, Steven. Vikings signed Levi Onwuzurike, Mekhi Becton, Javon Holland, and Cooper Kupp. Kupp's an interesting one because I think Kevin O'Connell would love to have Cooper Kupp. I think they would love to have Cooper. And I think you might be able to do it, Dave, for a 5th, 6th pick swap because of what the contract is. And you could probably maneuver with that contract once you get him in the building, get him to take a pay cut, maneuver it and add void years to the contract and spread out the money to make the cap hit smaller. And you wouldn't lose a draft pick. It would just decrease in value.
Yeah, but why do that if they're just going to cut him anyways?
I don't think they're going to cut him. That's my read on it. I have seen no information saying they're going to cut him. I've seen that they're seeking a trade, but I've seen nothing that says we're going to cut him. It would be different if I'd seen that piece of information. But we also know with the Rams, what they do is they will trade players to the destination they want and take less because they want to be player friendly. Ernest Jones, they got nothing for Ernest Jones. They got nothing for Jalen Ramsey, who is the number 1 paid cornerback in the NFL. They got a 3rd round pick and a backup tight end. They paid 2 firsts and a 4th to get Jalen Ramsey just a few years prior. This is how the Rams operate, for better or worse.
Daniel,
and I think you might be able to acquire him.
Kupp would be a 4th option. He might be wide receiver 2 in the first few weeks. We'll find out. There's more Jordan Addison news today. His hearing got bumped out to March 12th.
March 12th, yeah, which is completely fine. I think the big thing there is the way this Vikings offense works. Justin Jefferson is option 1.
Obviously.
But I do think that there's enough fluidity between 2, 3, and 4 if you bring in Cooper Kupp, where I don't think it matters who's 2, who's 3, who's 4.
Right. And then
it depends on the play, depends on the scheme, depends on the situation. Like, they're interchangeable. TJ Hawkinson, if you average him out over the course of an entire year, he has over 900 yards. Like, I don't really see it.
In the year before, he was number 2 wide receiver. Basically.
Yeah. And that's part of my big thing.
And he'll come back more because JJ McCarthy's going to throw to him.
Theoretically, we'll find out how if McCarthy ends up being the guy, how he likes to distribute the ball with these guys, who's he built a rapport with, and how he likes to kind of maneuver within the offense, because there's a lot of unknowns there. But Jefferson's one with a bullet, and then if you brought in Kupp, I think 2, 3, and 4, you could interchange on a play-by-play basis, because I think they're all grouped in a bucket where I can trust them to be 2, 3, or 4. And I think that's an incredibly valuable asset to have. The financials could be a major hindering factor here, but it's something that you can work around when you have the cap space. And let me tell you, you want to maximize JJ McCarthy? One of the reasons why the offensive line struggled as much as they did at the end is because Sam Darnold would not get the ball out quick, and how he likes to play. McCarthy theoretically will get the ball out quicker because he's a quicker processor based on what we have for this college tape. He's still going to want to find the shots down the field, but he's not going to be a hold the ball kind of quarterback. And they maximize the hell out of Darnold with that. But we're going to see a change in how the offense runs next year with McCarthy. How big of a change? We'll find out, but it will be different. And I think that needs to be factored in as well. Thank you guys so much for joining. This is bold predictions. They're not meant to be intentionally bold. They're not meant to be like, I'm just going to say things to say things. We're not First Take. These are all calculated, thought out ideas that can also end up being bold, especially when they're players we really haven't talked about much. Like, I didn't have DJ Reed, Trey Smith on my list, but we've got some good players that the Vikings can target. I just completely whiffed that James Daniels tore his Achilles. So I might have to revisit that one, but I think they're going to be very active. I think they're going to be very aggressive, but I also think they're going to be calculated. They're not going to spend money to spend it. They're going to spend money on people that they think are right for the organization. Just,
yeah,
as I say,
I don't think they're going to bring in any locker room cancers. Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers ain't coming here. If you anybody in the media who's parroting that is just trying to drive traffic, and I won't do that. Yeah. My big thing is with free agency, just because they didn't sign the guy you wanted doesn't mean it's a bad signing. Keep an open mind. It's tough for me sometimes too, because I want X and they got Y. And it's like, why didn't they get X? I wanted X. But then Y ends up being really good. Jonathan Gard wasn't really on my radar last year, and boy, am I glad they signed him. Let it play out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget, Two Old Bloggers is on Sundays starting this week. Hey, now with the move to Sundays, hopefully Darren's going to make it every week. We can only hope, right?
Yeah, I've already got the tight end evaluation notes for this show.
Perfect. And we will be back next week. The week after, I will be in Mexico, so there may or may not be shows for me. We'll have to figure that out on our end. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. Thank you so much for watching. And leave your own bold predictions in the comments if you didn't watch live. I'd love to hear them. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!